Whether you're new or experienced with tarot, we have all made mistakes and are sometimes still making mistakes within our practice. Some of these mistakes prevent us from doing more accurate tarot readings, and some aren't mistakes at all, but just a part of our practice. Welcome to It's a Witchy Life podcast, where we explore the world of witchcraft and tarot to elevate your practice and live your best witchy life. Today, I am sharing 10 things that I believe every tarot reader should avoid. However, some of my tips might totally not work for you, and that's okay. Take the tips that resonate and leave the rest. Number 1, neglecting self-care and energy protection. When you do a tarot reading, I personally think that it's really good to be in the right state of mind. If you are overly angry, overly emotional, overly anxious about the situation, or sad about the situation that you're doing a reading on, it is good to realize that the reading that you're doing, first of all, might not be totally accurate because you're being very influenced by your emotions, by your thoughts, by your current mindset, but also that you just might not really be protecting yourself enough when you do a tarot reading. I personally think that tarot readings can be intense when you pull a card and you read something, especially if it's about a situation that you're already feeling very emotional about. And I think that if you do a reading and you're in that very emotional, very hurting and vulnerable headspace, and you do a reading, that you're only going to end up hurting yourself more. So that way, I mean that I think it's important to protect yourself, protect your emotions, protect your energy, your mindset, and be sure that if you are feeling very emotional about a situation and you want to do a tarot reading on it, I highly encourage you to do a little bit of self-care and energy protection beforehand, which can look like either taking a little time to meditate or calm down before you do the reading, or even if you are into spells and witchcraft, maybe you'd like to do a little ritual to protect yourself, to protect your energy, light some incense. I know Wiccans like to cast circles sometimes. So those are things that you can do to protect your own energy and also make it so you have a little bit of time to calm down before you sit down and do the reading. Number 2 is to rely too much on predictive readings. Personally, I never really wanted to use tarot to predict the future. I've always very much seen it as a way to gain insights into a situation and knowing what I can do, how I can move forward, or just, messages, things that I need to hear right now. That is what I have always really liked to use tarot for, but I do know that it's very attractive. It's very alluring, the idea that you can use tarot to predict the future. But if you do use tarot to predict the future, I'm not saying that that is a mistake on itself, but I would just like to give you a little bit of a warning to not dive too deep into doing predictive readings with tarot, because first of all, it kind of takes a surprise out of life. I think part of what makes life so fun and interesting is being surprised, not really knowing exactly what is going to happen. So that, first of all, but also there's always, even when you do a predictive tarot reading, there's always room for, free will and other influences to start playing a role that weren't a thing on the time and place that you did your predictive tarot reading. So either things are gonna not turn out the way that you had hoped in regards to your predictive tarot reading, that can make you feel very uncomfortable, make you feel very uncertain, unsure about your tarot reading practices. But it's also like, what did you do the reading for then? If you wanted it to specifically predict something and then it didn't happen exactly the way that you predicted it. So that is like another reason that I think you shouldn't rely too much on predictive reasons, but also just because I think it's a shame, because tarot can be used for so many amazing things outside of predictive tarot readings. Like I said, I really like to use it for guidance into situations. So more like action focus on what I can do, how I can make the most out of a certain situation or something like that. I like to do tarot readings on certain decisions, mostly having to do with my career, my YouTube channel. Those are things that I really like doing tarot readings on, but also introspection and looking at myself as a person and where do I have shortcomings and how can I, instead of like just being aware of the shortcomings and being like, oh, well, I have those shortcomings, that's fine, and using them as an excuse. I like to use tarot to see how I can actually improve on those shortcomings. Not that I want to be a person that has zero shortcomings, because first of all, that's no fun. And also, I don't think that that's like very natural. Anyway, that's a whole rant for another day, I guess. But I think that tarot can really help you with overcoming some shortcomings, or learning how to deal with certain parts of yourself, or if there are certain parts of yourself that you're sort of not seeing, then you can use tarot to kind of uncover that, bring it to the light, and work with it. So that is a whole rant on what type of tarot readings you can do instead of a predictive reading. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section below what you really like to use tarot for. If it is predictive readings or if it's something else, I would love to hear. So number 3, something that I like new tarot readers, I guess, mostly to avoid, but also those who aren't really familiar with using tarot spreads. I want you to avoid jumping straight into complicated tarot spreads. So I have talked so much. I talked so much about how I love tarot spreads, and I use tarot spreads pretty much all the time. In my own practice, I use them for my clients. I teach it in my new course, The Confident Tarot Reader, which I'll link down below. But I do think that there's a line where certain tarot spreads are more like approachable and more easy to do, like a past, present, future spread. Those are just 3 cards, or 6 cards if you want to pull 2 for each position. But there are also spreads that are way bigger, like the Celtic Cross spread. Now, I do teach the Celtic Cross spread in my course, The Confident Tarot Reader, but it's like under the advanced, under like the Beyond the Basics part of the course. And I do think that if you slowly take your time to build up to a more complex tarot spread, I do think that it can be very useful, it can be very beneficial. But if you are not used to working with tarot spreads, if you're not even used to working with tarot at all, and jumping straight into a complicated tarot spread like the Celtic Cross, first of all, it's gonna be really hard for you. It's gonna be very frustrating for you to lay out all the cards, keep looking at what every spread position even stands for and how to interpret it. You're gonna make it way harder for you, and it's not gonna be an enjoyable experience, to be honest. If you want to make that Celtic Cross spread a little bit more approachable, a little easier, you can just do the 6 cards in like the cross part, and you can skip the staff part, and slowly build your way up to that. But yeah, that was my point number 3, to not jump straight into complicated tarot spreads. So now let's go to number 4. And this one is both for just tarot readers for their personal practice, but also for their professional practice if they do tarot readings for other people. And that is lack of ethical considerations. So what I mean by that is that when you do your readings, when you do your tarot reading, and I talk about this in the Confident Tarot Reader, my course, I think it's really important to consider what your ethics are when you do a tarot reading, whether it is, like I said, for yourself or for someone else. Do you think it's ethical to read on people and people's energy who have not consented to having their energy read? Or do you think it's okay? Or do you think that there are exceptions or ways to protect yourself and protect the person that you're reading on from like having very private things revealed? So for me personally, what I do if someone comes to me with a relationship reading or a friendship reading and I want to read for them on that person, I have to read their energy sort of. So beforehand, I set my intention with my tarot reading that I am going to do a relationship reading for this client, and there is this person involved. And my intention is that I only want to know, I only want to learn and pass through information that I am allowed to know to help my client get a better understanding of the relationship and their questions. So that is how I sort of protect not only myself from learning very personal information of people that I don't need to know, but also to protect them, the person that I'm reading on without their consent, to protect them from having their private information to me through tarot, because that is not what I think tarot should be for, and that is an ethical a moral that I personally have. And I think that if you do a tarot reading, it's very important to consider your own ethical stance on those topics, on those things. So even if you are in a relationship and you want to do a tarot reading on your own relationship, or maybe for a friend, or if you're in a situationship, you're dating and you want to read on their energy, I think it's very important for you, very ethical actually, to set the intention that you're only going to read on them to know only the things that you're allowed to know, that you need to know in order to make better decisions for within this relationship or within this friendship. Okay, now let's go on to number 5. And this is something that I kind of did for a long time, and it's ignoring your intuition. Because when you do a tarot reading, it's very, I want to say simple, because the way that I teach tarot is you have your keywords and you have your spread. And then you put your keywords on the spread once you've pulled the cards, and that is how you can interpret it. And there's not a lot of intuition that comes with that, but I also teach that how to use your intuition to come up with these interpretations so that the reading is still intuitive, if that makes sense. So that is why I think it can be very easy to ignore your intuition when you do tarot reading. Like, for some people, it comes so natural to listen to your intuition, to get in touch with your intuition when you do a tarot reading, or just in general life. For me, it was never that way. For me, it was really hard to understand what my intuition is. It was really hard to understand, to differentiate, I guess, between my thoughts and intuition and what was supposed to be in the reading and what wasn't. When I started out, that was really hard and really complicated for me. Over time, I got better at it. I got more experienced with it. But in the beginning, it was something that was really hard for me. And then I took my tarot deck, just the Centennial RWS. I took it with me for Christmas and I showed it to my little brother. And he saw all of these intuitive things in all of these cards. And I was like, what the fuck? I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know he was able to do that. But I didn't know that for some people, it is that easy to pick out things in cards to use for their intuition. And it wasn't easy for me, at least not with the original RWS. Yeah, there are some other decks that I have found way easier to read intuitively. But I was shocked that he was able to do that so quickly. So if he were to do a tarot reading, I would encourage him to listen to his intuition and to look at what he sees in the cards. And of course, keep the tarot card meaning behind, like in your mind, but don't ignore your intuition just because maybe it doesn't super jive with the card that you pulled and the original tarot meaning connected to that card. I think, the tarot card meanings are there for a reason. And I think they make for a really good foundation, or really good basics to understand. But that doesn't mean that you cannot build on top of it with your intuition. Okay, now let's go to number 6. Another thing to avoid as a tarot reader is to neglect further learning. I am of the opinion that nobody is ever completely learned out. There's always more that you can learn. For me, I pretty much have my, my basic knowledge, understanding of the tarot down. I'm very comfortable with doing readings on the fly, on any on anything for anybody with basically any deck that I have. So I'm very comfortable with that. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing else to learn for me in tarot, because there are still a lot of symbolism that I can learn. There's still astrology that I want to learn. Like, I am not currently doing the Guidebook that I know a lot of people are doing here on YouTube and outside of YouTube, but they're following it on YouTube for the most part. But that is not really something that I'm looking to do right now, maybe in the future. But I definitely want to learn astrology within the tarot a little bit more. And I do have the book Tarot and Astrology, so I definitely do see myself doing a Guidebook at some point in my practice, just because I really want to learn about astrology and the tarot. But even if you already know all of that stuff, there's still more to learn. There's always more to learn when it comes to reading the tarot. So I just want to encourage you that even if you think, well, I know all the tarot card meanings, so I can do a reading and I don't need to learn anything more. Maybe you don't want to. Maybe you really don't want to. But if you want to grow in your practice, I really encourage you to take a look at what other aspects of the tarot you can dive deeper into, whether it's history, whether it is, I know there's like a lot in the Golden Dawn, whatever it's all called, with the Kabbalah and all of that stuff. Maybe that's more of your thing. Maybe, like I said, the astrology part of it. I know that there are, someone in the Discord community is doing the Hollow Quest with the Arthurian tarot, and I know that she's having a lot of fun and a lot of great learning experiences with that. So you're just never completely learned out, if that makes sense. Number 7, what I want you to avoid is to feel like you cannot or should not use the guidebook. I love using the guidebook for my readings. Not necessarily always for tarot. I definitely use the guidebooks for my oracle decks way more often, just because like the tarot is a system and I can use my tarot keywords for pretty much every tarot deck that I own, but every oracle deck has different meanings to every card. So it makes sense that I'm definitely using guidebooks for my oracle decks more than for my tarot decks. But still, when I do a reading, I'll put down the cards and I'll do my initial reading. And if I want to add another layer on top of that, I'll go to the guidebook and see what it has to say. Oftentimes it's like similar to what I have said or what I have thought, how I interpreted it, but sometimes there's layers on top of that I can add to my reading or not. Maybe they say something and I'm like, no, that doesn't really resonate at all, and that's fine too. But I just feel like sometimes it can be a little looked down upon if someone wants to use the guidebook for the readings, because apparently it's all about intuition. And I mean, I said it's important to not ignore your intuition, but especially if you're new to reading the tarot, your intuition may not really be trained yet. So you might have to lean on a guidebook. Or even if you have like a good connection with your intuition and you do very intuitive tarot readings, still, it doesn't have to be bad to take a look at the guidebook. Take a look at what the guidebook has to say, because it's there for a reason. The person who created the deck wrote it, so you might as well read it, right? Okay, so let's go to number 8. And this is one that I struggled with a lot, and I sometimes still struggle with it. And what I want you to avoid is to compare yourself to other tarot readers. I am personally very immune to like Instagram, and where people say, yeah, don't compare your life to what Instagrammers' lives look like. And that I absolutely do not. But when it comes to a skill, when it comes to my hobby, when it comes to something that is so important to me, like my tarot practice, I definitely get to compare or do compare my practice with the practice of other people. And what I mean by that is that I see some people like do card pulls every day. I'm like, whoa, I could never, just because I'm not in the right headspace all of the time. I'm currently still suffering with my burnout. So I still have brain fog almost daily. I still can't focus. I have a lot of concentration problems still. Like, I've had this like the entirety of 2023 so far. Still waiting for treatments, but so it's kind of impossible for me to do daily tarot readings, but that doesn't stop me from comparing my practice to the practice of those who are doing daily tarot readings or who do these. Like, I see this with Dawn Michelle a lot, and I think she is so inspiring, and I think her videos and her content and her readings are so inspiring. But I definitely sometimes compare myself to what her reading, like what that all looks like, her practice, because she like pulls out like a couple of decks every month that she has worked with, and I'm like, wow, I look at my shelf, I have 2 tarot decks on there right now, because if I have more than 2 tarot decks on my shelf, then I don't get to experience new decks. So right now what I have on my shelf, I actually have it right here because I use it for another video. I have my Good Karma Tarot and I have my White Newman Tarot. And these are the decks that I've been pulling from, mostly actually the White Newman, because I'm trying to connect with that a little bit more and to see if I want to pass it on or if I want to keep it. But these are the 2 tarot decks that I have on my shelf, and those are the only decks that I used in the entire month of May. Like, I'll probably put some new ones there for the month of June. I'm pre-filming this a bit, but that makes me almost feel a little bad. Like, okay, she's using like 5 or 6 decks every month. Why can't I? Like, I have all of these decks that are just sitting there, and I mean, I guess I could do an entire episode, an entire video on comparing your practice to someone else's practice. So I guess I'll just stop here. But if you don't mind sharing, I would love to hear, how do you feel you compare your tarot practice to the tarot practice of other people? And this is definitely a social media thing, right? Because it's only through social media that I'm able to see all of these other people's tarot practices. If I wasn't on social media, I wouldn't have this problem. But then again, there is a lot of inspiration and a lot of learning to be done through the tarot practices of other people. So I do feel like I don't want to shut myself off from that, because I definitely learn a lot from watching other people's practices. I gotta stop comparing myself so much. Now on to number 9. What I want you to avoid is to ignore your personal bias in an interpretation. And this kind of is similar to the first point that I had when you are in a certain headspace, when you're feeling emotional. And if you do a reading on something that's really personally close to you, then it can be really easy to have your personal bias influence that. And I've had that happen with my political tarot readings that I used to do. I'm thinking of starting them up again. I don't really know in what form. If I do, I'll let you know in the community tab probably. But I definitely, we all have biases. I personally have a very strong political bias. And when I did those tarot readings, those political tarot readings, I sometimes had a really hard time separating my personal bias from the interpretation of the reading. Now, I'm not saying that I did like inaccurate readings, because there are a couple of readings that I did that were kind of spot on, that I kind of surprised myself with. But that doesn't mean, like, it was still a tough thing for me to deal with, that I had such trouble severing my personal biases with the reading that I was doing. So that is something that you might not totally be able to avoid, but I still want you to be conscious of when it happens. And then number 10, what I want you to avoid is to push yourself into a practice that doesn't really feel like yours. And again, I think this is somewhat similar to the comparing yourself to other people's tarot practices. And I think that there's so much on YouTube that is so inspiring, on social media that is so inspiring when it comes to people's tarot practices. Everybody has their own touch. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Everybody has their own decks that they really like to use. And I personally fell into the trap of creating this idea of what my tarot practice needed to look like, not just because I was comparing it, but also this, like, what is it called? The fantasy self. Like, I did an entire video around my birthday last year about my fantasy self when it came to my tarot practice, and it was just very easy for me to fall into the trap of creating this idea of what my tarot practice needed to look like, then trying to shift my tarot practice into that, only to end up feeling like this is not really for me. So that is what I wanted you to keep in mind when you are looking to expand your tarot practice or change something up in your practice or introduce new things in your practice, get some things out of your practice. Make sure that it truly feels like you, and make sure that you feel truly comfortable with it. And, sometimes you want to introduce something that you think it could be truly valuable, and you just need to try it out for a little bit before you know whether or not it's for you. And I definitely am not suggesting that you're not even trying, you won't even try that. But just be mindful that your tarot practice, it's important because it's your spirituality, it's your personality, it's your practice, it's your life, it's your hobby, your skill that you're doing on your own situations. And it's important that it reflects you and it reflects what you feel comfortable with. Wow. So if you enjoyed our chat on 10 things that I think every tarot reader should avoid, I think you'll also like this video where I react to tarot TikToks for more of my tarot opinion. Click the video on the screen right now to watch that. Subscribe for more tarot chats, deck reviews, all that fun stuff. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!